Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. And in today's video, I want to go over a couple of tips that's going to help you. And it's from chapter 12, help you to understand how to get some of the questions right that would be posed to you on the NASM exam from this particular chapter and help you pass the test. Just that little bit more information. And again, these are just some tips I wanted to give to you. Spoken to a number of students recently, and kind of made things a little bit more clear as to where students are struggling, particularly in this area. Now, I guess you could say this is the infamous chapter 12 assessments, right? Static postural assessment. By the way, I am on page 384, or excuse me, yeah, 384, 385. This is the beginning static postural assessments, then moving into the dynamic postural assessments. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sure why it's such a struggle to memorize some of this information. Although obviously, after I talk with folks, I get it. It's the terminology and it's the total number of overactive and underactive muscles. You know, I've said it before, especially when I talk about this entire chapter from a studying perspective. The more you understand the basic concepts that sort of underlie this whole issue with postural assessments, both the static and the dynamic, the more you understand it. And then, of course, just kind of memorizing the name of the muscles, just as a, for instance, the easier it is to answer the basic questions. NASM is not trying to fool you. All right. And they're not trying to throw you off. They will ask questions that will really demand that you know the material. That's all, right? They have to ask relatively challenging questions to see if you actually know this stuff. But the tips that I want to give you here is really designed to get you to think in a specific way. And by the way, introduction, remember to continue in the introduction, read, write, recite. No matter how I go through this, it's always going to be fundamentally the same thing from a strategic standpoint, studying standpoint. Okay. I think that's redundant. Colored pens, pencils, markers, it doesn't matter. Pen. I mean, look, this thing should be glued to your hand. I'm a lefty. It should be glued to your hand. Unless you're doing a perusal of the chapter or a perusal of the entire book, that's the only time when you're like this. Everybody pens down. That's when you read through, but you're not trying to study when you do a perusal. Okay. And I know some of you are freaking out right now because you got 2 weeks left or you got a week left. I get it. If you've been studying and you're still freaking out, then there's a study issue. There's a learning memorization issue that you have not navigated effectively through. That's why I want to go over this with you, because a couple of tips here that can be very effective to ease your anxiety when it comes to knowing the materials. Look, you've got to study the names of some of these muscles. You need to know that the serratus anterior does this, that when this muscle is overactive, the gluteus medius, you need to memorize some of those, but it's not a ton of information, because what you're going to find is that particularly in these two assessments, the static postural assessment and the dynamic or the overhead squat assessment, a lot of the muscles that are overactive and underactive are exactly the same. Okay. But here's the first tip that I want to give you. And I actually have this up on my digital format. So look, I like to use the textbook. Digital format gives me the ability to actually show it to you on the screen, makes it easy. If you have the digital format, I was telling one student the other day, the best part about it is, particularly after you take a practice test, remember, when you take practice exams, you need to look at the ones that you got wrong and go right back to the textbook and know why you got it wrong. And the way to do that is just to use your little guide right here. Throw the, versus trying to flip through the entire textbook. If you've got the digital format, that's all I'm saying, is that if you have it, great. So I put pes planus in there, boom, pulls me right up to chapter 12. But here is the tip. Here's like the main tip when you're looking at this information. Okay. And again, my take on this is that when you're going through chapter 12, try and memorize the muscles. overactive, underactive. But here's the thing to really keep in mind, right? Tip number one, make sure that when you're studying these, you are differentiating between the static postural assessment and the issues related to overactive, underactive muscles, upper cross, lower cross syndrome, and pes planus. Make sure you distinguish that over here. Memorize that information, read that information, understand the kinetic chain checkpoints, right? And by the way, don't be freaked out by terms like that, kinetic chain checkpoints. It's joints. What's happening at the ankle? What's happening at the knee, hip, pelvis, shoulder, right? Cervical, neck, head, things like that. That's all that means because that's where the movement occurs. So don't get freaked out by that, right? Kinetic chain checkpoints are simply those points that you look at that are all the movement areas of the body, right? Shoulder, things like that. And that's what you're looking at. So again, don't be overly concerned if you see a term that is a little bit more challenging, like that terminology, kinetic chain checkpoints. So here it is. Make sure that you are clearly differentiating pes planus, upper lower cross syndrome, the postural distortions, and all the information, overactive, underactive, that goes along with those. Okay. Once you understand that, and by the way, NASM tells you common distortion patterns, how a client presents in static stance, just standing there, a roadmap of how they've been using their bodies with time. Look, your client's a hot mess posturally because they're sitting all day long and they're protracting. I was telling somebody just today, I don't think I've ever seen somebody present with externally rotated, with the hands facing forward, right? External rotation at the shoulder, over retraction, and those other elements related to that, to the backside mechanics issues that we talk about versus front side. Everything is front side. Everything is geared towards moving into the embryonic position. Okay, that's the way I always look at it. We go back to this fetal embryonic position. Think about it. How are embryos and the fetus, how are they shaped? They're like, everything is protracted, internal rotation, head is tucked down. Well, that's what we end up going to. Why? Because we're sitting here all day long. So the goal is to do the exact opposite, right? Scapular retraction, external rotation of the humerus, getting the lower back in its proper position. But the point is the tip I want you to understand is that the static posture, when you make those differentiations between those two, it's going to be very helpful. So study the static postural assessment, understand why the knee, the ankle, the LPHC are in these different positions. And again, NASM made it easy for you. There's 3 common distortions. Now, there's probably many more distortion syndromes. I know there are, but the 3 common ones, and they just want you to know those, okay? And you can do that just by looking at, pages 384, 385. And of course, they've got the pictures here for you. And now that you've got that under your belt and you've used the read, write, recite method, pes planus, write your overactive, underactive, potential muscle imbalances. They give it to you right here. Okay, don't overthink these. Don't overthink this. They've given it to you in tables 12.1 and 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3, right? So 12.1, there's your pes planus. There's your 12.2 lower crossed and your upper crossed syndrome, right? So again, static positions, potential muscle imbalances. Look, you simply have to memorize the terminology. How do you do that? By the way, if you're concerned about the memorization of it, no. There's an easy way to do it. And yeah, it is easy. You just rewrite it over and over and over again. This is what helps you. Use colored markers. It helps with the visual acuity stuff. Okay, you would be amazed. You'll have nightmares about this. You won't be able to forget it after a while. So if you have questions, there's other videos that we have done that kind of explains some of the reasons why you're going to see the potential overactive nature of the, in this case, cervical extensors, and the underactive nature of the cervical flexors in this, what's known as upper cross syndrome. Okay, so tip number one, clearly distinguish static postural assessments and the issues related to them. Put those guys over here. And don't get confused now when you move into these, there you go, into the dynamic postural stuff. Now, again, I've done a couple of videos on this as well, for sure. Make sure that you go in on our YouTube channel, obviously, and go ahead and take a look at those. Very helpful. The overhead squat assessments, single leg squat assessments, pushing, pulling assessments, they all have their own unique issues related to what's going on with the overactive and underactive muscles. For the most part, they're going to be very, very similar. However, here's the kind of the second tip, is that when you look at these two, the overhead squat assessment, because it's a movement assessment, static, this is it. Those are your issues. Movement assessments, you're going to see more issues related to over and underactive muscles, and keep them there. Make sure you memorize that the serratus anterior is overactive if those arms are coming down. And this is where the confusion comes in. That's why I'm going over this with you. The confusion comes in where you start to look at underactive, overactive muscles related to a particular joint, and then you're thinking postural distortions. No, 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 no. Okay, keep those over here, and then look at your movement assessments on their own side of the house over here, right? So memorize those related to the particular movement dynamic assessments. That is the critical. So number one, make sure you got those two separated. Second is, remember that there's going to be additional muscular activity or actions that you're not going to see in the postural distortion syndromes. At that point, you can start memorizing and keeping them separate so that when you see questions on the exam, and this is it, I see a lot of confusion on the practice exams where it was actually related to the postural assessment, but the student was thinking overhead squat assessment. No, never the twain shall meet. Don't try and connect the two. This is the tip. Don't try and connect those two. Even though you're going to see some similarities, remember the movement assessments are designed to show you very unique, different issues that are related to this, the client's actual, not their posture, static, but related to their movement patterns and the issues related to their neuromuscular issues and struggles and problems that they face that only movement assessments can actually explain to you. So if you keep those two separate, it's going to be a lot easier, and it's going to make a lot more sense when you see some of these questions that come on the test, because when it's a dynamic postural assessment, single leg, whatever, overhead squat is really the one that going to spend a whole lot of time on. You're going to be very pleased to find that you're going to know the answer out of the list of the 4 possible responses that they give you. So just keep that in mind. And that's really what I wanted to go over with you today. If you have any questions as I pull us out of the share mode, you have any questions on this or any other topic that we cover, please let us know in the comments section. If it's helpful, by the way, let us know as well. Remember, you can go to our Facebook page, right? You can let us know if you're not in there. Go ahead and get in there, because we have the private group and a lot of folks that are studying for the NASM exam, helping each other out. It's a great community that we have there as well. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel here, notification bell, all the stuff you got to do on that, and just let us know how we can be of assistance to you. As always, it's a pleasure helping you out to pass your NASM exam, and have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Thanks.